joined the European Union 15 years ago. We survived the fall of communism 30 years ago. We introduced market economy and all those things, pluralist society, democracy, 30 years ago. And still, after 40 years of communism, we are still on just 85% compared to European average. And 30 years are gone. So if someone thinks that even with all help of cohesion funds and European money, European budget, you can do it overnight or in 5 years or 10 years, it's impossible. We have to gradually work on these convergence, but we cannot introduce universal social legislation, welfare legislation, healthcare legislation, whatever the kind. That's impossible.
It is interesting, actually. There's a survey out in the Financial Times yesterday suggesting that actually there is economic convergence since those nations joined 15 years ago.
Very slow.
And that apparently it's almost comparable with different states within the United States. But we will leave that there, because don't forget, we are putting questions to this man, Jan Zahradil. He is the man who wants to replace Jean-Claude Juncker as Commission President in the next couple of months, or towards the end of the year. And we want you to get in touch and ask questions. All the contact details are on screen. You can send us a message on Facebook if you're watching there. You can write us an email. The address is rawpoll@euronews.com, or indeed tweet us with your views using the hashtag #RawPolitics.
So yes, do get in touch. Keep the comments coming. And while we wait for your questions and comments, let us see what Jan Zahradil's colleagues really think of him. Here are some personal reflections they sent to us.
Team player, intelligent, ambitious.
It's not easy for me to describe Jan Zahradil in only 3 words.
Jan is passionate, he's committed, and he's a reformer.
If I should use only 3, I would say that he is very patient, courageous, and determined politician.
Wise. He's a gentleman with a reformist soul.
I think it's political professionals which allowed him to see always a goal and to create an acre.
Probably his experience. I can call him a veteran.
It's definitely his expertise in the EU policy making.
His commitment to our common conservative values.
He is brilliant at relating to people and being able to turn how they feel into a really passionate, well-argued political point.
I would like to see him more in Czech Republic than in Brussels.
His greatest weakness is music.
I would say he's always trying to see some good rock and roll concert. Perhaps it sometimes takes too much time.
Maybe his musical taste. I mean, hard rock music is not my favorite.
Jan Zahradil's weakness is rock and roll, baby.
Recently I was quite surprised and even amused to see Jan with a little white dog. I would never guess he had a dog.
I remember the one time he took us all to this really trendy club in Strasbourg with this amazing African artist, and we partied the night away in only the way that Jan Zahradil can make things happen.
It was about 17 years ago during the EU convention when both of our countries were not yet members of EU. Because our surname started with Z, we were just neighbors sitting Zahradil and Zile, and that's how we met first time. And ZZ Top, when we are playing, Jan is always enjoying ZZ Top music, even if we are playing.
It's a lot about the music,
I think your political friends might like your political opinions, but they're clearly not big fans of your musical tastes.
Well, some of them, yes. Definitely Mr. Zile is one of them who shares my musical taste.
At least there's one, all right.
He's playing guitar himself, so...
There we go. Well, I mean, we haven't got any instruments, unfortunately, for you to play this evening, but let's carry on with the questions instead, because we've got one more from our studio audience. Emil Herman wants to ask a question and is with us. What's your question?
Good evening, Mr. Zahradil. My question is, in the last couple of months, I've been involved in the climate marches in Brussels for a simple reason that us, the young generation, we realize that climate change is a key issue that must be tackled now in the next 10 years. But concerning your position, you deny being a climate skeptic, but you stand against a green agenda that you consider as financially dangerous for Europe. So my question is actually very simple. If you get elected as president of the Commission, which concrete measure would you put in place to ensure this ecological and sustainable transition that is necessary while maintaining this financial stability?
Well, first of all, the word skeptic is quite frequent here tonight. I don't think that I am climate skeptic. By the way, I have some professional environmental background because by original profession I am an engineer in water technologies. So I do know something about the issue. But to your question, I would stick with our current commitments, the Paris Climate Agreement. We've made certain commitments, we have to stick with them. But I have to be very straightforward and very open when it comes to that call from the Commission and from the Parliament asking for zero carbon economy until 2050. I believe that it's nice to say that, but it's pretty unrealistic to achieve that. I think that we should first fulfill our current commitments we have made already, and then once we do that, we can maybe declare some new bold strategies and agendas and things like that. Now, what I believe we can do, or what the Commission can do, Commission can do two things. Commission can legislate, and Commission can redistribute money from the European budget. Which money we can use for environmental protection? We have almost 40% of money spent for agriculture. So I would say that we should support organic farming. We should change the system, how we support the common, how we pay subsidies from Common Agriculture Policy chapter. I would say that we should go away from a production-oriented support to organic farming, supporting small farms. There is, by the way, one very good initiative already declared by the Commission, which is called 1 hectare. Have you heard about that? Each farmer which converts 1 hectare of his land into forest will be subsidized for that. Because of what? Because we know that forests and trees are very simple biological machines that consume CO2 from the air, transform it into an organic matter, and also keep the water in the soil. So I think that this is one very good example of what the European Union can do.
When I asked the question earlier on, when I said, do you believe that climate change is entirely man-made?
Not entirely.
Why not entirely? Who else or what else is causing climate change?
Well, you have some natural cycles. You have also some solar impact and things like that. Simply, you have...
But most scientists do think that, well, we at least are causing the vast majority of climate change. Why do you not accept that expert opinion?
I accept that. I'm saying that I'm not denying the fact that CO2 and other greenhouse gases, man-made greenhouse gases, are causing climate change. What I'm saying is that there are also other, maybe minor issues or minor causes that also have certain impact on that. But it is not climate denial, climate change denial, anything like that. I'm a scientist by profession myself, so I usually have a great empathy for scientific arguments. So don't worry about that.
All right, it's related to climate slightly as well. Our final video question of the evening comes from Fleur Zanella. She's from Belgium, and this is what she wants to ask you.
What and when are you going to do something about non-tax kerosene and cheap plane tickets and start making train tickets cheaper and connections better throughout Europe? Thank you.
I'm afraid I didn't get it.
She's asking...
They're taxing non-taxed kerosene and cheap plane tickets. And just to add to what she's saying, because there has been a leaked EU report that says that, in fact, if jet fuel is taxed, it would cut the sector's carbon emissions by 11% and have a negligible effect on employment.
I think this is debatable. This is definitely an issue for a next Commission. By the way, I'm against any pan-European taxation on anything because I think that states should tax,
but for aviation,
not European Union. But for the aviation, I think it's debatable. Yes, I think that...
are you for or against taxing kerosene?
I'm not saying at this moment for or against. I think we can debate that. This is not... I'm not saying no to that.
So when it comes down to it, on the kind of macro level about your environmental agenda, does business, will that always trump the environmental message? If, for example, if business is going to be affected negatively, because of the environmental policy from the Commission, you will always choose the interest of that business or making money here in Europe over the environmental policy?
I think whatever we do in environmental protection and in fighting climate change has to be also socially sustainable. Look what happened to Macron. He introduced a very small tax on fuel, and immediately he's been facing huge protests of those social groups that couldn't have afforded that. We cannot get ourselves into that situation, particularly in Central and Eastern Europe, where there's a lot of heavy industry still there. You cannot convert it overnight to something else. And if you come there, if you tell those people, look, I have to close, or you have to close this coal power plant from one day to another, and this power plant is supplying this manufacturer or this company, then you will create only...
So you can be convinced, is your answer. You can be convinced.
I think we should do things gradually and in a sustainable, acceptable way for the society.
Just very
That's what I'm
quickly,
saying.
are you also pleased to see people, young people like Emile, on the streets? You know, young people who are passionate about politics. Is that a good thing to see these kids striking from school?
No, why not?
And trying to have
That's
an impact
okay.
on politics?
My son was amongst them as well, so I'm not complaining. That's fine.
OK, good stuff. All right, there we go.
Well, yeah. Do we have, let's head back over to our social media hub with Jack and May for some more of your reaction then.
Well, Tessa, the B word is coming up a lot tonight on the Facebook feed. That is, of course, Brexit, and wondering and hoping that that won't happen again. Many of our viewers are saying, hey, to prevent that from happening. And another idea being floated among our Facebook viewers tonight is the idea of a European passport. One man, Vladimir, says the United States have one, so why shouldn't Europe?
Keep those comments coming in. Still on the hashtag Raw Politics. We will continue putting them over to Jan Zahradil on the sofa.
OK, well, there's a little game that we do like to play here. Yes, on Raw Politics. It's a word association game. So I'll say something, and you tell me the first word, just one word that comes to your mind.
Yes and no.
Yeah, but this time it's a word association game, OK?
Let's try.
OK, let's start with Donald Trump.
Strong.
Brexit.
Mistake.
Viktor Orban.
Smart.
Turkish democracy.
Non-existent.
Greta Thunberg.
Naive.
That's a long OK. Matteo Salvini.
Controversial.
Abortion.
Nonsense.
Civil disobedience.
Like disagreement, so say.
OK. Civil disobedience.
Civil disobedience means what?
Like protesting on the street, like the climate strikes, yellow vest.
Pretty legitimate.
Pretty legitimate. OK, 2 words. Last one, rap music.
Acceptable.
Acceptable. Pop. I'll add that, pop.
It's more acceptable for me than pop.
He doesn't like the Eurovision Song Contest.
No, yeah, exactly.
That may be your most controversial policy to date.
Especially this week. OK.
Now, if you just joined us, you're watching Raw Questions here, a special series of shows with the candidates for Europe's top job. Tonight, we're joined by the Conservative and Reformist hopefuls, Jan Zahradil, and we want, as we well know, to put your questions to him. You can get in touch. We've got about 10 minutes left or so. The details are on your screen. If you're on Facebook, send us a message. You can email us at rawpoll@euronews.com, or you can tweet us using the hashtag #RawPolitics. We have got one more question coming in from one of our studio audience who submitted their question
on the website,
actually through the website, and it's a pretty brief one. It is that lots of us hate the euro currency. What is your opinion?
I didn't see it.
What do you think about the European currency?
They say lots of us hate the euro currency.
I think that it's an instrument, mostly political instrument for further integration. I think it should be made voluntary and not obligatory. And therefore, I am in favor of multi-currency union.
But for someone who is a staunch advocate of trade and more business, but the point of the euro is also to eliminate a lot of those extra costs that come with cross-border trading. So why would you be against a euro?
But I think, well, I'm not against.
Yeah, I mean, having a single currency for the bloc.
I think that anyone who wants, any state who wants to join euro should be free to do so. And any state which doesn't want to join euro should be also free
So in
to
this
do
case,
so.
you're choosing the freedom of a nation to choose versus implications
Absolutely.
on business. So that's
No, that's not true. Because there are also other implications of euro that are not so positive, and this is the fact that it is a political instrument of further integration. Because once you introduce euro, then probably you have to come with a harmonization of fiscal policy, tax policy, maybe social policies and things like that. And again, I don't believe in European Union as a state or quasi-state entity. I believe in European Union as a free conglomerate of cooperating states.
OK, we have to touch on it because we've had lots of comments in clearly on social media tonight. The B word of Brexit, which you can't get away from around here. You talk about not wanting to interfere in other nation-states' politics, and yet you refer to Brexit as a mistake. Surely the British public are entitled not just to actually want Brexit to happen, to make a success of it.
Well,
and shouldn't other European nations be allowed to follow that if they want to?
Maybe this was a misunderstanding because I didn't say whose mistake it was. And I think...
Is it Europe's mistake?
It was a mistake of the European Union that allowed one of its strongest and most successful members to leave. I believe that if David Cameron was offered at least something during those first negotiations, which he could have sold back home as a success or as a concession of the European Union, there might have been a different result of a referendum.
All right.
OK, well, there we go.
And by the way, probably there was one misunderstanding on this question of abortion, because I am pro-choice. I would like
just to clarify
make it very clear.
Well, there we go. We've cleared that one up. Let's just go for one final time back to the social media hub. Join Jack and May for the reaction from people watching. What are they saying, guys?
Well, one of the things we've been doing on these specials is using CrowdTangle as a tool to look at the Facebook power that you're generating throughout this campaign. Now, currently on the individual profile, so your own personal Facebook profile, you've got about 3% of the traction. So that's social media posts, comments, shares, likes. Unfortunately for you, Guy Verhofstadt, throughout this whole period, the last few months or so, has been well over 65% and pushing across everybody. But if you look at some of your competitors, Frans Timmermans, the socialist candidate's only got 4%, Ska Keller of the Greens, 2%, and Manfred Weber, your sort of fellow candidate on the right, he's only got 1%, so you're doing better than him.
But your party, I'm afraid to say, is not doing so well at all here on our grid. The Alliance of Conservatives and Reformists for Europe, well, they're number 10 and way down behind the European Greens and behind the Movement of Nation and Freedoms, that party as well of Marine Le Pen and Matteo Salvini.
Right, we were looking at all the Spitzenkandidaten there. I wanted to ask, are you even for the Spitzenkandidaten process?
Look, it's a useful thing to have one figurehead of each and every political party. But probably, unlike all the others, I still believe that when it comes to selection of a European Commission president, I believe that the Council should have the upper hand and not the European Parliament.
The process is dead anyway, isn't it? You listen to EU leaders, Macron's against it, a lot of leaders are against it, Mark Rutte's against it. It's not going to happen, is it?
Look, if I was not a Spitzenkandidat, I couldn't have talked to you, to those nice young people,
Why are we...
to all people at TV or online, and I couldn't have gotten my message through. So it's a useful thing. I think that you can concentrate the whole program, the whole set of principles of your political party into one person, and that person is responsible for delivering the message.
All right, we do have a little time left before we go and look at tonight's raw moment. We saw a little bit of it earlier, but you have gone for a musical theme for your campaign this year. We saw that, so let's take a look.
I think that might be the best political video we've had to date, though that might not say enough about political video. Why CDs? Does anyone have CDs anymore?
Who uses CDs?
Well, I know. But how you could have, all those emblems of or nicknames for those political
Which is
parties.
like, who's the target audience? Young people? But yeah.
Yeah. So the CD it was the right format to get a booklet there and to show.
Indeed.
Probably everybody was able to identify what the EU People's Band was. Or
I'm going to argue we should go back to vinyl records, but there we go. Anyway, that is it. We've got time for the programme. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. And that is it kind of from the series of interviews, apart from one, because despite asking him repeatedly over the last few weeks, so far Manfred Weber, the Spitzen candidate for the EPP, has so far not made time for this programme.
Not yet, maybe.
Not yet. We've got a few more days left, so you can spare us any time. We're very keen, along with all the other candidates we've had in this programme, to give you time and a platform and have you ask questions. So, Manfred Weber, if you're watching, get in touch.
Yes, we're waiting. And thank you very much for everyone watching. Thank you to our studio audience. And Mr. Jan Zahradil, again, thank you for joining us on the programme.
Pleasure.
And indeed to you at home for getting in touch. But until what? Raw Politics?
Yes,
thanks for watching.
we'll be back.
Good night.
Bye.
Goodbye. Thank you.
World leader of luxury expeditions. Pona.
Angola's Benguela province has been a trading powerhouse for centuries and has become a new magnet for business. That's in part because of a newly rebuilt railroad, connecting Benguela's port of Lobito with the mineral-rich regions of south-central Africa. There's also this new airport. In this edition of Business Angola, we look at the investment opportunities in a region reborn. Let's go. Katumbela International Airport is a leading symbol of this rebirth. Built to transport 2.2 million passengers a year, it's an ultra-modern complex with cargo capacity.
Here we have an intermodality of transport. We have railways, we have port services, and we also have airport services. So we are contributing to air transportation both inside the country and abroad.
Agriculture is among the top industries here. We talked to a farmer businessman who's called the Banana King. His father started the business with one tractor. It now spans 100 hectares, including cattle, herbs, and of course, bananas grown organically.
We are in the process of collecting and packing bananas. As you know, the region of Benguela is a very promising region in banana production. At the moment, we are in a training phase to enter the export market.
Montero has expanded to distribution for the farming sector. This warehouse sells tons of agrochemicals, seeds, and other supplies from around the world.
Why invest? You should invest here because the business environment is a very good one, isn't it? We have an airport, we have rail, we have a port. The economic environment is stabilizing, so it's a very good time to invest.
Montero says the economic opportunities here are both real and potential.
In Benguela, we have three key sectors. We have fishing, we have agriculture, and we have a great potential sector, which is tourism.
Indeed, Benguela province has major tourism potential with an endless coastline, sport fishing, beach bars and restaurants, the contrast of colonial and modern architecture, and palm tree-lined avenues looking like Southern California. It's called the City of the Crimson Acacia. And don't forget Mbaka National Stadium, built for the Africa Cup Games in 2010. There's also major international investment in the fishing industry here, competing with the local producers like Vimar and Filhos, a family-run company that's been here for generations. Their main catch, sardines and mackerel.
At the moment, we have 8 vessels with a capacity of 60 tonnes. In the production area, we have a capacity of 2,000 tonnes of storage and 400 tonnes for freezing. We're a 100% private company with a labour capacity of 600 workers.
Why should someone invest in the fishing business here in Angola?
First of all, because I think our country needs greater investment. It's a country that needs investments of the sort, in addition to being our own country. I think we should invest here to create jobs and economic development. This is a promising country.
That's all for now on Business Angola. From all of us here on the Euronews team, we say obrigado, thanks for watching, and see you next time.
This is Euronews Tonight, our top stories. Climate change, foreign policy, the economy, migration. The contenders for the EU's top job go head-to-head in a special Brussels debate. Christchurch call leaders and tech giants back, a call to prevent online extremist content. The US chooses to stay away. And Britain's opposition clarifies its position on Brexit, saying it will vote against the Prime Minister's withdrawal bill next month. Hello and welcome to the programme. Our top story. Well, the EU's top job is up for grabs, and the candidates hoping to become the next European Commission President have been battling it out in a high-stakes debate in Brussels. The economy, immigration, the climate and the future of the EU were all key talking points. Well, let's cross to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. He joins us from Brussels. Well, good evening to you, Darren. You're obviously following all of that debate. Did anyone come out on top for you?
Well, I have to say, I mean, looking at social media and indeed this hour that we've just had taking calls from across Europe, Frans Timmermans, the candidate for the Socialists in Europe, does seem yet again, it must be said, to have come out on top. It was certainly the view when the Maastricht debate had taken place a few weeks ago. Now, it must be said that even though that might be the popular view amongst those watching, most Europeans, of course, were not watching. And ultimately, just because you think someone won a debate doesn't necessarily mean it will change your vote. There were 6 of them on that stage, as you say, covering a wide range of subjects, everything from economic growth and austerity through to the environment and migration. And interestingly, there were clashes on this issue of migration. Manfred Weber very much making the point that he thought that Europe's future was tied to that of Africa and that there should be a commissioner for Africa if he takes charge. Whereas on the right, Jan Zahradil was making the point that the EU and the Commission had made a mistake in trying to share out the burden of migration over the last couple of years. And then Frans Timmermans touched on this point, it must be said rather pointedly, saying that he thought that a bit of Europe's soul died every time someone perished in the Mediterranean. Let's have a listen to what he had to say during that debate here in Brussels tonight.
First of all, every time a person dies in the Mediterranean, Europe loses a bit of its soul. So we're losing who we are. We're losing our values by not solving this problem. Secondly, once people are on boats in the Mediterranean, you have to take care of these people. And you shouldn't put fines on fishermen or other people in other boats who rescue people at sea like the Italian government is doing now. That is unacceptable.
And Darren, the climate's obviously been one of the key topics in the run-up to these elections. What did the candidates have to say about that?
Yeah, it's been extraordinary, actually. And every time we have interviewed the lead candidates here on Euronews and asked for you to get in touch with us with questions, climate change and what people call the climate crisis has repeatedly been the top topic. And clearly it was again tonight with all the candidates having to field questions on what precisely they would do, from, for example, taxing aviation fuel to reintroducing night trains to making the issue of climate change the top priority in any forthcoming commission. What was interesting is they're all trying to out-green each other in many regards, which led Ska Keller, the Green candidate, to argue that they were just catching up with an agenda that her party had been pursuing for years.
If you're saying emission trading is great, then why did you vote, personally, why did your group vote against reforming the ETS and making it actually workable? Right now we're giving out so many free certificates that they can go for free and even trade the certificates among themselves, the very big companies.
Exactly, because my party is a party who's trying to bring things together. We can be ambitious, and that's the job of the Greens in a way, to be very strong on climate change. But again, I had a meeting with the trade unions, not with CPP voters mainly, with trade unions, socialists, who told me if you implement the goals of the Greens, then we have no future for our jobs. And that's why let's be sustainable. Sustainability from the United Nations means ecological ambition, also economic stability.
Now, despite tonight's rather glitzy debate here in Brussels, it should be emphasised that these are merely just the League candidates because of their political groupings in the European Parliament, and only through a convention that started 5 years ago should whoever tops the poll become the next Commission President. But there are two things that are an obstacle to that, Isabel. Number one is we don't know what the European Parliament will look like in just over 10 days' time. It could be a very different place where none of these candidates can sustain a majority. And second of all, ultimately the decision is up to the EU Council, to the leaders of the different EU nations, and some of them, including the French President and the Dutch Prime Minister, have made it clear they do not like this process at all and they would prefer a different type of candidate. So ultimately, it's not guaranteed that they will take over. Clearly, some of them hope they will be when Jean-Claude Juncker stands down at the end of November. There is a special EU Council meeting taking place 2 days after the election in just under 2 weeks' time to decide if this Spitzenkandidat process will ever succeed.
So some potential wrangling ahead. Well, Darren McCaffrey for us there in Brussels, thank you. And in that debate, we heard from Spitzenkandidat Nico Coué. But now it's time to find out more about the group he represents, the Party of the European Left. Here's Jack Parrock with the brief from Brussels.
The group of the European Unitary Left is small, but noisy. It has 52 MEPs, the fifth largest group, and usually attracts attention with its protests. Here we see them in full action against the EU's free trade agreement with Canada. Another of their goals has been the fight against austerity, and that's how they received the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. On austerity, the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has a lot to say. His party, Syriza, is the only one of the group that currently governs in a country of the European Union. After the massive dose of austerity that Greece endured, this was his message.
Είναι μια υπόθεση που πρέπει να μελετηθεί πάρα πολύ από την Ευρώπη, διότι η Ελλάδα αποτέλεσε ένα πείραμα το οποίο εξέθεσε τις κοινές ευρωπαϊκές μας αξίες.
Another country with strong representation of the left in the European Parliament is Spain, with Podemos at the top. In total, Spain has 10 European left MEPs. Germany is next with 8 seats. Greece with 6, Portugal contributes 4, and the Irish nationalists of Sinn Féin 4 also. France, Italy and the Netherlands have 3 each.
In exchange for some social changes.
The group occupies the left of the parliamentary arch, but only a few accept the label of communists. In fact, within the group there are different sensitivities, and only one party has agreed to designate its main candidates for the European elections. The Belgian trade unionist Nicolas Q and the Slovenian former actress Violeta Tomic.
Neoliberalism is to blame for everything, you know. Neoliberal politics are those who make people so unhappy that they jump now into the hands of far-right populists.
The fight against social inequality is one of their main battles, but also pacifism, feminism, and the rejection of the fortress Europe they say denies entry to migrants. During the last legislature, the head of the parliamentary group was the German,
Gabriele Zimmer. Austerity policies and budgetary cuts are the magic potion of the devil, she says. According to the polls, in the European elections, they could improve their results and get up to 5 more MEPs. But for this, they will need to join forces and leave behind the divisions that grip the confederal group of the European left and the Nordic Green left.
Thank you. Now, Miguel.
Jack Parrock there with the brief from Brussels. And as you may have seen, ahead of that European election vote, our team of road trippers are doing a relay across Europe to get your views on the issues that matter to you. And our reporters Vincent McAviney and Leszek Kazak went all the way from Wrocław down there in western Poland up to Poznań, which is Poland's 5th largest city. And earlier, I spoke to Vincent McAviney.
We've been out campaigning with Robert Biedron. He is a former MP and mayor of a small city, and now he's got a new party that's fighting in the European elections next week. And in a country which is going increasingly conservative and the Catholic Church still has a lot of power, he is the only openly gay politician in the country. He and his husband are both campaigning to be elected as MEPs. Here's what they said about the hope that they think they're providing for people on the left in this country.
We are unstoppable, and this is the momentum for change. We'll use it or we'll lose it. And we'll have Europe.
As Theresa May headed to the Commons to face renewed attacks on her Brexit plan and open revolt against her leadership. She's announced her deal will be put to MPs for a 4th time early next month. It's opposed by those who want a complete break from the EU and others who want a new referendum.
We voted against her deal and we voted against no deal for good reasons. But she's not shifted and she's out of time. Will she admit now that all that's left is no exit, or will she go back to the people?
I believe the people were given the choice as to whether we should stay in the European Union in 2016 in the referendum. They voted, they gave their decision, and I believe it is up to this government, not just this government, but this House, to respect the decision that was taken.
Her party is facing potentially disastrous EU elections and many Conservatives want her to resign. One MP passed on the sentiments of local party activists.
They've lost confidence in the Prime Minister and wish her to resign before the European elections.
This is a government that wants to deliver Brexit and has been working to deliver Brexit. Sadly, so far, the House of Commons has not found a majority to do that. If everybody in the House of Commons had voted alongside with the government and the majority of Conservative members of Parliament, we would already have left the European Union.
With the government still negotiating with Labour on a Brexit compromise, Jeremy Corbyn held fire in this Prime Minister's questions. But a spokesman confirmed the party won't back May's deal in June unless there are meaningful concessions and a formal cross-party agreement. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
And since those Prime Minister's questions, the Shadow Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Emily Thornberry, has ruled out a possible Labour Party abstention on the withdrawal bill vote, but will vote against it if it does not meet the Labour Party's conditions. And still to come on the programme, we're answering the Christchurch call. Leaders and tech giants have come together and pledge that they will do their best to prevent extremist content online.
The biggest business event of the year, the 12th Astana Economic Forum. Global leaders and leading international experts will come together to discuss the most important issues of the world economy. Over 5,000 participants from 100 countries of the world. 100 speakers. May 16 and 17, Kazakhstan, Nur Sultan, Expo Congress Center.
Welcome back. Well, world leaders have gathered in Paris with the tech industry's biggest players looking to make a united push against rising online extremism. The initiative, known as the Christchurch Call, has been spearheaded by New Zealand Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern, with French President Emmanuel Macron co-hosting the talks. They come in response to a mass shooting committed by a self-described white supremacist at 2 Christchurch mosques in March. 26 countries and tech giants have pledged to back the Christchurch Call, which aims to keep violent and extremist content off online social platforms. Well, while the United States government decided not to pledge its support for the initiative, the American social media giant Facebook announced plans to toughen rules around its live streaming service. Facebook Live was used by the Christchurch gunmen to broadcast the attacks online. Mrs. Ardern commented on Facebook's decision.
We know from the announcement made by Facebook today that under that change of practice, the terrorist on the 15th of March would not have been able to live stream his act of violence. Now, that is, of course, just one element of the work that we must do. Ultimately, we want to be in a position to prevent harm in the first place, to make sure that lives aren't lost.
Now, Paul Fellinger from the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network joined us with more on this. His organisation works on issues related to internet governance around the world. And I asked him how these governments and tech companies might go about keeping extremist content off the web.
I think with many policy issues, the devil here lies in the details. There's now a high-level political impetus that was given with this call today in Paris. But how it will be implemented, what are the concrete procedures, the mechanisms? This is what has to be defined. And the truth is, it is complex and it is difficult. No single actor has the silver bullet, not the governments and not the tech companies. So what this call today shows is that there's an even larger need than ever before for a sustained and ongoing collaboration between all the different involved actors, the governments, the international organizations, the tech companies, the civil society actors, and other concerned stakeholders.
OK, but really now, in a nutshell, very briefly, please, what impact will this have on freedom of speech? Because that's a big concern.
Absolutely, and this is precisely why this requires multi-stakeholder collaboration. The decisions that we're taking today under a great sense of urgency, they will impact the future of the cross-border internet and our digital societies. And there's a lot of political pressure in the system, so it requires that all stakeholders come together to discuss exactly how to reconcile those 3 objectives that I mentioned.
Paul Fellinger from the Internet and Jurisdiction Policy Network there. The governor of the US state of Alabama has signed into law a bill outlawing almost all abortions in the state. The legislation is described as the most restrictive in the nation and could punish doctors who perform the procedure with up to 99 years in prison. Now, Alabama is not the only state to institute new laws around abortion. We've also got the states of Georgia, Mississippi, Kentucky and Ohio who've introduced new laws which ban abortion once a fetal heartbeat is detected. And there are 7 other states are also considering similar legislation. Lawmakers, it's expected that any of these state-level abortions, including Alabama, are likely to face legal challenges. Those challenges could lead to a Supreme Court decision on whether or not to overturn the landmark ruling that legalized abortion in the US decades ago, commonly known as Roe versus Wade. Now, Bobby Singleton is an Alabama senator with the Democratic Party, and he fought against the state's new abortion legislation. In an interview recorded before the bill was signed into law, he told us that a Supreme Court challenge is exactly what this abortion bill supporters are hoping for.
the sponsors of this bill bought this bill strictly to try to get it before the U.S. Supreme Court to deal with Roe versus Wade decision. And right now, I just think that the Supreme Court, and hopefully that the Supreme Court, will not select this as one of the test cases as it goes through the legal process.
OK, but how, if you were to place bets on this, let's say, how likely do you think, given the current makeup of the Supreme Court, that that would not be the case?
I think it's about a 30%, a 70% chance. On the 30% side, I think that, there's some problems in the bill that's not tightened up in terms of when life starts. This bill does not have a heartbeat, or it doesn't say 6 weeks, 2 weeks. It says when a woman knows, when she has knowledge of her pregnancy. It could be when she does her home pregnancy test, or it could be time she goes see her doctor, or it could be at any point in time that they feel that she knows that's when life starts. So I think the Supreme Court is going to have real issues at trying to define what life is and when life actually starts under this particular piece of legislation.
And if we look at the wider situation in the US, this isn't isolated to Alabama at all. Why are we seeing this growing anti-abortion movement in the United States at the moment?
It's all coming from the head of our government, from President Trump. When he came in and promising to take out Roe versus Wade, and since he put those appointments on the U.S. Supreme Court, we've been seeing in Georgia, Ohio, and other states pass laws such as the sweeping law that came through Alabama on last night.
And are you beginning to lose faith in the U.S. justice system as you see these cases now kind of growing across the United States?
Yeah, with the narrative as it is in across the United States, I lose a little bit of faith each and every time. But I want to try to remain some hope in the justice system for those 9 men and women who sit on the United States Supreme Court, that they will look at the law as it is and not vote political party or their political preference.
And what do you think about the fact that, particularly in Alabama, this is a decision that's being made by men about women?
Yes, if you look across the aisle, there's 27 men on the Republican side. The only women that are in the Alabama State Senate are the 4 women that are on the Democratic side of the House. And so all of those women were totally against this bill. And now you have 27 men telling women what they can do with their body. And that is one of the big problems that I have.
Alabama Senator Bobby Singleton there. And still to come on the programme, we bring you the voices from the social media campaign highlighting the true costs of living with a disability. Welcome back. Well, expensive housing, lost wages and higher out-of-pocket tuition costs are just some of the things named by people around the world using hashtag the cost of being disabled. Well, let's get more from Alex and our team in the Cube.
Now, where did all this begin? Well, let me bring up an article here. It's an interview by Imani Barbarin. She shared this, where she interviewed people with the title of the article there being The Cost of Being Disabled. Now, that really struck a chord. That became a hashtag the cost of being disabled, where people living with disabilities saw this as a chance to let other people know just how difficult and challenging things can be. Now, this started in America, and just remaining there in America, if I might, this is Shana. She sent us her perspective from Massachusetts, one we asked for people to share some of their experiences with us. This is what she had to say.
For me, the cost of disabled goes so far beyond medical bills. It's also about missing out on parts of life that everyone deserves to have, like being able to get to a job and not worry about how you're going to get there, if you're going to be able to stand once you get there, and wondering how people are going to treat you when you get there. It's also the emotional toll it takes on you and your family, and just having to take time off, not being able to go to things like concerts and fun events, and often things that everyone, especially if you're a young kid and you have a disability, should be able to have in life.
Now, that's really interesting there, the cost of being disabled. People putting it in terms like Shana did there, far beyond simply financial terms. Now, one of those, when this hashtag started spreading globally, was Rhiannon. She's a PhD student from Cardiff, and speaking to Matthew here in the Cube, she was explaining some of the challenges she faces. And let's not forget, polling season is soon upon us here in Europe, the European elections. Well, Rhiannon was saying that actually it's more than just financial costs of being disabled, pointing out that many people find it very hard to make it to the polling stations, to operate within these polling stations, and then also to be able to have a secret vote without somebody needing to be there with them. That's something that's pointed out by the EU Disability Forum. In a tweet, they shared the perspective of somebody else living with a disability. Her name was Nina, and she was saying how difficult it was to be at a polling station, how hard they are to access for many people living with a disability. And then also raising that issue of how you're able to have the privacy that every other citizen has to cast your vote without there being somebody there with you. So, Isabel, this hashtag really capturing the feelings of so many people living with a disability, and those costs going so far beyond simply additional financial burdens.
And thank you for joining us on Euronews tonight. We leave you with a no comment from Paris as it wishes the Eiffel Tower a happy 130th birthday.
This Saturday on Euronews.
In this week's Business Planet, we're in the Czech Republic to see how one nanotechnology cluster is doing big things with the very small. It's maximising tech talent by helping firms scale up and break into international markets. How being part of a cluster could help boost your business. That's in Business Planet on Euronews and Euronews.com.
This is Euronews Tonight, our top stories. Climate change, foreign policy, the economy, migration. The contenders for the EU's top job go head-to-head in a special Brussels debate. Christchurch call leaders and tech giants back a call to prevent online extremist content. The US chooses to stay away. And Britain's opposition clarifies its position on Brexit, saying it will vote against the Prime Minister's withdrawal bill next month. Hello and welcome to the programme. Our top story. Well, the EU's top job is up for grabs, and the candidates hoping to become the next European Commission president have been battling it out in a high-stakes debate in Brussels. The economy, immigration, the climate and the future of the EU were all key talking points. Well, let's cross to our political editor, Darren McCaffrey. He joins us from Brussels. Well, good evening to you, Darren. You're obviously following all of that debate. Did anyone come out on top for you?
Well, I have to say, I mean, looking at social media and indeed this hour that we've just had taking calls from across Europe, Frans Timmermans, the candidate for the Socialists in Europe, does seem yet again, it must be said, to have come out on top. It was certainly the view when the Maastricht debate had taken place a few weeks ago. Now, it must be said that even though that might be the popular view amongst those watching, most Europeans, of course, were not watching. And ultimately, just because you think someone won a debate doesn't necessarily mean it will change your vote. There were 6 of them on that stage, as you say, covering a wide range of subjects, everything from economic growth and austerity through to the environment and migration. And interestingly, there were clashes on this issue of migration. Manfred Weber very much making the point that he thought that Europe's future was tied to that of Africa and that there should be a commissioner for Africa if he takes charge. Whereas on the right, Jan Zahradil was making the point that the EU and the Commission had made a mistake in trying to share out the burden of migration over the last couple of years. And then Frans Timmermans touched on this point, it must be said rather pointedly, saying that he thought that a bit of Europe's soul died every time someone perished in the Mediterranean. Let's have a listen to what he had to say during that debate here in Brussels tonight.
First of all, every time a person dies in the Mediterranean, Europe loses a bit of its soul. So we're losing who we are. We're losing our values by not solving this problem. Secondly, once people are on boats in the Mediterranean, you have to take care of these people. And you shouldn't put fines on fishermen or other people in other boats who rescue people at sea like the Italian government is doing now. That is unacceptable.
And Darren, the climate's obviously been one of the key topics in the run-up to these elections. What did the candidates have to say about that?
Yeah, it's pretty extraordinary, actually. And every time we have interviewed the lead candidates here on Euronews and asked for you to get in touch with us with questions, climate change and what people call the climate crisis has repeatedly been the top topic. And clearly it was again tonight with all the candidates having to field questions on what precisely they would do, from, for example, taxing aviation fuel to reintroducing night trains to making the issue of climate change the top priority in any forthcoming commission. What was interesting is they're all trying to out-green each other in many regards, which led Ska Keller, the Green candidate, to argue that they were just catching up with an agenda that her party had been pursuing for years.
If you're saying emission trading is great, then why did you vote personally, why did your group vote against reforming the ETS and making it actually workable? Right now we're giving out so many free certificates that they can go for free and even trade the certificates among themselves, the very big companies.
Exactly, because my party is a party who's trying to bring things together. We can be ambitious, and that's the job of the Greens in a way, to be very strong on climate change. But again, had a meeting with the trade unions, not with CPP voters mainly, with trade unions, socialists, who told me, if you implement the goals of the Greens, then we have no future for our jobs. And that's why let's be sustainable. Sustainability from the United Nations means ecological ambition, also economic stability.
Now, despite tonight's rather glitzy debate here in Brussels, it should be emphasised that these are merely just the lead candidates because of their political groupings in the European Parliament, and only through a convention that started 5 years ago should whoever tops the poll become the next Commission President. But there are two things that are an obstacle to that, Isabel. Number one is we don't know what the European Parliament will look like in just over 10 days' time. It could be a very different place where none of these candidates can sustain a majority. And second of all, ultimately the decision is up to the EU Council, to the leaders of the different EU nations. And some of them, including the French President and the Dutch Prime Minister, have made it clear they do not like this process at all and they would prefer a different type of candidate. So ultimately, it's not guaranteed that they will take over. Clearly, some of them hope they will be when Jean-Claude Juncker stands down at the end of November. There is a special EU Council meeting taking place 2 days after the election in just under 2 weeks' time to decide if this Spitzencandidate process will ever succeed.
So some potential wrangling ahead. Well, Darren McCaffrey for us there in Brussels, thank you. And in that debate, we heard from Spitzencandidate Nico Kueh. But now it's time to find out more about the group he represents, the Party of the European Left. Here's Jack Parrock with the brief from Brussels.
The group of the European Unitary Left is small, but noisy. It has 52 MEPs, the fifth largest group, and usually attracts attention with its protests. Here we see them in full action against the EU's free trade agreement with Canada. Another of their goals has been the fight against austerity, and that's how they received the German Chancellor, Angela Merkel. On austerity, the Greek Prime Minister Alexis Tsipras has a lot to say. His party, Syriza, is the only one of the group that currently governs in a country of the European Union. After the massive dose of austerity that Greece endured, this was his message.
Είναι μια υπόθεση που πρέπει να μελετηθεί πάρα πολύ από την Ευρώπη, διότι η Ελλάδα αποτέλεσε ένα πείραμα το οποίο εξέθεσε τις κοινές ευρωπαϊκές μας αξίες.
Another country with strong representation of the left in the European Parliament is Spain, with Podemos at the top. In total, Spain has 10 European left MEPs. Germany is next with 8 seats. Greece with 6, Portugal contributes 4, and the Irish nationalists of Sinn Féin 4 also. France, Italy and the Netherlands have 3 each.
In exchange for some social changes.
The group occupies the left of the parliamentary arch, but only a few accept the label of communists. In fact, within the group there are different sensitivities, and only one party has agreed to designate its main candidates for the European elections. The Belgian trade unionist Nicholas Q and the Slovenian former actress Violeta Tomic.
Neoliberalism is to blame for everything, you know. Neoliberal politics are those who make people so unhappy that they jump now into the hands of far-right populists.
The fight against social inequality is one of their main battles, but also pacifism, feminism, and the rejection of the fortress Europe they say denies entry to migrants. During the last legislature, the head of the parliamentary group was the German, Gabriele Zimmer. Austerity policies and budgetary cuts are the magic potion of the devil, she says. According to the polls, in the European elections, they could improve their results and get up to 5 more MEPs. But for this, they will need to join forces and leave behind the divisions that grip the confederal group of the European left and the Nordic Green left.
Thank you.
Now, Miguel.
Jack Parrock there with the brief from Brussels. And as you may have seen, ahead of that European election vote, our team of road trippers are doing a relay across Europe to get your views on the issues that matter to you. And our reporters Vincent McAviney and Leszek Kazak went all the way from Wrocław down there in western Poland up to Poznań, which is Poland's 5th largest city. And earlier, I spoke to Vincent McAviney.
We've been out campaigning with Robert Biedron. He is a former MP and mayor of a small city, and now he's got a new party that's fighting in the European elections next week. And in a country which is going increasingly conservative and the Catholic Church still has a lot of power, he is the only openly gay politician in the country. He and his husband are both campaigning to be elected as MEPs. Here's what they said about the hope that they think they're providing for people on the left in this country.
We are unstoppable, and this is the momentum for change. We'll use it or we'll lose it. And we'll have Europe, or we will strive that we will drive towards Russia and Belarus and on the eastern direction. This is a civilizational momentum, and I hope and I believe Polish people will take a right decision 26th of May.
Vincent McAviney speaking to Poland's Spring Party leader Robert Biedron there. Now, the British Prime Minister is again facing calls to quit from within her own party. It comes as Theresa May tries to buy herself time with a new vote in Parliament on her Brexit deal. MPs on all sides of the Brexit divide have vowed to vote down the withdrawal agreement when the government brings it to the House of Commons next month. Neil O'Reilly reports.
Is this make or break?
With enemies on both sides of the House, Theresa May headed to the Commons to face renewed attacks on her Brexit plan and open revolt against her leadership. She's announced her deal will be put to MPs for a fourth time early next month. It's opposed by those who want a complete break from the EU and others who want a new referendum.
We voted against her deal and we voted against no deal for good reasons. But she's not shifted and she's out of time. Will she admit now that all that's left is no exit, or will she go back to the people?
I believe the people were given the choice as to whether we should stay in the European Union in 2016 in the referendum. They voted, they gave their decision, and I believe it is up to this government, not just this government, but this House, to respect the decision that was taken.
Her party is facing potentially disastrous EU elections and many Conservatives want her to resign. One MP passed on the sentiments of local party activists.
They've lost confidence in the Prime Minister and wish her to resign before the European elections.
This is a government that wants to deliver Brexit and has been working to deliver Brexit. Sadly, so far, the House of Commons has not found a majority to do that. If everybody in the House of Commons had voted alongside with the government and the majority of Conservative members of Parliament, we would already have left the European Union.
With the government still negotiating with Labour on a Brexit compromise, Jeremy Corbyn held fire in this Prime Minister's questions. But a spokesman confirmed the party won't back May's deal in June unless there are meaningful concessions and a formal cross-party agreement. Neil O'Reilly, Euronews.
And since those Prime Minister's questions, the Shadow Secretary of State for Foreign Affairs, Emily Thornberry, has ruled out a possible Labour Party abstention on the withdrawal bill vote, but will vote against it if it does not meet the Labour Party's conditions. And still to come on the programme, we're answering the Christchurch call. Leaders and tech giants have come together and pledge that they will do their best to prevent extremist content online.
The biggest business event of the year, the 12th Astana Economic Forum. Global leaders and leading international experts will come together to discuss the most important issues of the world economy. Over 5,000 participants from 100 countries of the world. 100 speakers. May 16 and 17, Kazakhstan, Nur Sultan, Expo Congress Center.
This week on Euronews.
Angola's Benguela province has become a new magnet for investment. That's because of a rebuilt railroad adding muscle to the local economy, connecting the port of Lobito with the mineral-rich heart of southern Africa. There's also this new airport. Check out investment opportunities in a key region of one of Africa's leading economies in Business Angola on Euronews and Euronews.com.
He's one of the most influential thinkers of our times. Heads of states and leaders of the world's biggest companies are eager to listen to him. Yuval Noah Harari is a 43-year-old professor and the author of Sapiens and Homo Deus. We talked to him in Budapest.
Mr. Harari, thank you for joining us in the global conversation. Let's start with a bet. As the European parliamentary elections are coming, the future of the EU is in the focus of debates. How much would you be willing to wager that in 15 years there will still be a European Union?
I don't know. And as a historian, what I do know is that you cannot predict the future of such things. Very often the most unexpected things happen in history. That's the only sure thing about history. Just a few months before the 1989 revolutions in Eastern Europe, nobody expected that. 5 years before that, it would have seemed like science fiction. So also with the future of the EU, you can't tell. I hope that voters will make the right decisions and will keep the EU because it is essential, not just for the peace of Europe and the prosperity of Europe, it's really essential for the peace and prosperity of the entire world.
In your books, you emphasize that cooperation can be the answer for global challenges. But nowadays it seems that cooperation is difficult worldwide. Nationalism has strengthened across Europe. Why do you think it became popular, and what should be the answer for that?
People should realize humankind is now facing 3 existential threats that cannot be solved on the national level. They can only be solved on the global level. These threats are nuclear war and climate change and technological disruption, especially the rise of artificial intelligence and bioengineering. AI and bioengineering could destroy what it means to be human. And the only way to deal with it is by global cooperation. If we start an arms race in artificial intelligence or an arms race in genetics, this guarantees the destruction of humanity. Whoever wins the arms race doesn't matter. Humanity will be the loser.
Binary thinking can be dangerous as well, as far as nationalism is concerned.
Nationalism has a good side and a bad side. Nationalism has been among the most positive developments of human history, but also has a dangerous side. The positive side of nationalism is that it enables millions of strangers to care about one another and to cooperate. The evil side, the other side of nationalism, is about hating foreigners. And I think this is not the essence of nationalism. Part of the problem you see today in certain parts of the world is that instead of focusing on loving your compatriots, you have people focusing on hating foreigners. You have people who often could be corrupt. They take money from the healthcare system. They don't really advance the interests of their fellow citizens. But then they present themselves as very good patriots. Why? Because they hate foreigners.
Lots of people only wish to reinforce their beliefs or opinion instead of reading credible news.
Yes.
And how can we get back to the path of rational discussion when some leaders avoid meaningful answers by pointing out on scapegoats like George Soros or Fethullah Gulen or the liberals?
Yeah. Well, this was always, it's not a new trick, it was always the case. What's new now is that we have these immensely powerful new technologies for hijacking and abusing human attention. The problem we are facing now is technology overcoming our weaknesses. We now have powerful technology that can identify your weaknesses, what you already fear, what you already hate, and grab your attention by pressing these emotional buttons. So this is one of the reasons that we need to regulate these dangerous technologies to protect humans from being hacked, from being exploited, to protect human attention from being abused.
Aren't you afraid an Orwellian-style dictatorship will misuse this big data?
I'm very much afraid. I think that now the technology makes it possible to create far more totalitarian regimes than anything we've seen in human history, even more extreme than what George Orwell imagined. Because Orwell imagined a situation in which there is a totalitarian regime that monitors you all the time, but only what you do in the outside world. Where you go, whom you meet, what you say. Now we are getting the technology to monitor people 24 hours a day, the entire population, but even what's happening inside their bodies. with biometric sensors and with the combination of AI and biotechnology, there are already, for example, schools in China where students wear these biometric bracelets. Now it's being used, they say, for educational purposes. The teacher knows if you fell asleep, if you are bored, if you are having difficulties, but the same technology can be used for political purposes. So what we saw in the 20th century with Stalin and Hitler and Mao will be nothing compared to these totalitarian regimes that are already starting to be built today.
What is the danger if there would be an elite who can even afford to long life, yes, and downtrodden masses who are useless?
If we don't utilize the new technologies correctly, then the result is what you describe. Biotechnology will be used to upgrade a small elite into a superhuman status, whereas most people are left far behind. So you have humankind splitting into different species. For the first time in history, the rich will be a different species from the poor. That's the greatest inequality in history. A lot of jobs will disappear, but new jobs will emerge. The really big problem won't be the absolute absence of jobs. The big problem will be retraining people. People will have to change their jobs again and again and to learn throughout their lives. And at present, the education system does not prepare them for that.
Finally, some personal questions. As a citizen of Israel, how your thoughts are influenced when you hear constantly shellings and the sirens?
I don't hear constantly. I mean, it happens just now and then. The situation in Gaza is really terrible for the people living there. But in Israel, most of the time, most people live a very normal life. It certainly influences my thinking. I think it makes me far less naive about many of these developments. If I lived in San Francisco, then I could easily have these rosy visions of, yes, technology is wonderful, it's doing all these wonderful things for humankind. You live in Israel, you realize that humankind has a lot of dark sides to it.
Every year you take a long meditation trip. How can you find your way back in your everyday life after this?
Everything is rushing so fast. The technology, the politics, it's more important than ever to take time off, to completely disconnect, to give yourself the time to get to know yourself, really, to think deeply about these issues. We don't have time almost for anything, and we need to make the most important decisions in the history of humankind in the next few years. We now have divine powers of creation and destruction, and it's humans, not gods, who need to decide what to do with them. One of my concerns when I go and meet these important people, I just met Mark Zuckerberg in California, and I just met Sebastian Kurz in Austria. And one of my main concerns is that these leaders, they don't have time. They don't have time to just, sit and relax and think about things deeply, because they're all the time rushing and having to deal with this crisis or that crisis.
Mr. Harari, thank you for participating in the global conversation.
Thank you.
They can make us think, smile, laugh, and maybe even cry. We're talking about the drawings exhibited in the World Press cartoon in Calhas de Rainha in Portugal. The exhibition opened on May the 4th, shortly after the awards gala, and one theme in particular is beginning to emerge: the environmental issue, increasingly evident in the designs that marked 2018.
Pollution, ecology, global warming, which are different sides of the same coin, are increasingly present. These cartoons represent an increase in the sensitivity of the general population and cartoonists as well. Then we have the classic subjects like Trump, Putin, that mark the political agenda. That's reflected in the exhibition.
To prove it, the winners of the Grand Prix won the prize of €10,000 thanks to a caricature of Bashar al-Assad, a four-handed work.
It's not normal. People usually do it alone, but we like to work together. We used to work on other projects together. This caricature in particular, we have a lot of time to do it, and it's a character that interests us personally.
Syria, but also Jamal Khashoggi, the Saudi journalist killed in Turkey, the issue of migration, the election of Jair Bolsonaro and Brexit were some of the themes that inspired the cartoonists. In all, more than 900 works published in the press of 68 countries participated in the competition. The selection of the best works was done by an international jury. And the jury awarded the first prize in the editorial category to a drawing about Cuba.
Because of the changes that are occurring, that's why I have the idea of putting Cuba in a garage, a workshop. They're working, but they haven't finished yet. There are many generations working to improve our country, our beloved island.
Societal issues such as the scandals of paedophilia in the church or dependency on computers and the amazing rhythm that we live today were other themes that marked 2018. In the category of gag cartoon, the jury was seduced by a drawing by Mexican artist Bolijan with the title Recharge. The work is an apology for the siesta and deceleration.
This is a drawing that looks like it's only humorous, but it reflects the society in which we live. I try to compare the human being with the technology, with the mobile phones, that sometimes need a recharge of 10 minutes to continue. We also need a break.
The 14th edition of the World Press Cartoon is already open. It's in the Cultural and Congress Centre of Cartagena. There are 280 cartoons from around the world which depict the year 2018. It's to see until the 28th of July.
28 de julho. 12 dias, Euronews.
This weather report is brought to you by Turkish Airlines. This weather report was brought to you by Turkish Airlines.
From the European Parliament in Brussels, this is Raw Politics. Thank you for joining us tonight. And this is what we have for you on the program. Spits and doubts. Candidates for Commission President face off in a TV debate. But what are their real chances for Europe's top job? Enemies of Europe. EU Commissioner Pierre Moscovici strikes out at rising populism at a special Euronews event. Christchurch call. Emmanuel Macron and Jacinta Ardern unite world leaders and big tech in the fight against online extremism. Veggie discs. The EU's crackdown on meatless product names and the online backlash against it. And Win Salvini, Italy's deputy prime minister, launches a social media game show with himself as the prize. Thank you for joining us this evening. It is now time to meet our panelists. We have joining us Brian Maguire. He's a reporter and broadcaster with Euractiv. Hi, Brian. What story are you watching closely?
Spitzencandidate, for me, the story is getting more and more interesting as we get closer to the date of decision, because there are so many factors at play here, and nobody really has a clear handle on which way it's going to go.
I know. We still don't know. It's really close already. All right. Also joining us tonight, Ana Gomes. She's a Portuguese MEP from the Socialists and Democrats group. Well, hi, Ana. What about you? What are you watching?
I'm paying attention to the Christchurch call and the challenges of curbing terrorist content online, the big problems, how to manage that, and without, of course, breaching basic fundamental rights. But at the same time, not in allowing these networks. And we absolutely need to break Facebook and its big digital platforms, as some of the founders of Facebook
and world leaders have gathered in Paris for that.
We absolutely need governance.
All right. Okay. And joining us tonight as well is Philip Schulmeister. He is a pollster with the European Parliament, heading up their monitoring unit. Hi there, Philip. What about you?
Well, for me, it's definitely also the Spitzenkandidaten debate. Well, because I'm most interested actually in seeing whether they're going to hit the right topics that citizens are really interested in, what they want to hear about during this campaign.
And since you've got the finger on the pulse, you will be able to tell us. All right, and that is exactly where we're beginning tonight. It is now just over a week until voting begins in the 2019 EU elections. Around 375 million Europeans will be able to cast their vote and have a say on the big issues facing Europe. And that includes migration, climate change, taxation, trade, and a whole lot more. Now, all those topics and more will be up for discussion in tonight's big debate between the candidates competing for the Commission presidency. The European broadcaster EBU will be hosting that debate right here in the European Parliament in Brussels. And you can catch a debate here on Euronews from 9 p.m. Brussels time. And let's take a look at who the candidates are. So first, we have Nico Couet from the European Left, Ska Keller from the European Greens, Frans Timmermans from the Party of European Socialists, Margrethe Vestager representing the Alliance of Liberals and Democrats for Europe, Manfred Weber for the European People's Party, and Jan Zahradil from the Alliance of Conservatives and Reformists in Europe. And our political editor, Darren McCaffrey, he was allowed to have a sneak peek, lucky him, inside the chamber where the debate will be happening, to speak to one of the moderators as well. So let's take a listen to what they've both been expecting tonight.
Well, welcome to the chamber inside the European Parliament here in Brussels that has been transformed tonight for a debate involving the 6 Spitzenkandidates who want to take over as the next Commission President. They are going to battle it out for 90 minutes to try and convince you that their political parties across Europe should get your vote, and indeed that they should replace Jean-Claude Juncker as the next Commission President. Now, in fact, we are not allowed on that stage because it's so shiny. You have to wear special footwear to get on. But it is a big event with a very big screen. And tonight they're going to be talking about 3 topics: my future, what's in it for me, the environment, and our values and the world. Since this is one of the biggest and the only debate involving all 6 candidates that will take part during this election campaign. And one of the moderators is Marcus Price, who joins us here in the chamber. What are you hoping, first of all, to kind of get out of tonight? What's your main aim?
Of course, first of all, I hope for a lively debate, because I think that's one of the rare moments where you have like a campfire situation, perhaps, hopefully, all over Europe. So giving people a good perspective on who are those candidates. I think as somebody who lives in a Brussels bubble, they are all well known, but I think outside it's completely different. So that would be a big task for me, and then get them being concrete on certain topics. I think there's a lot of debate in the EU, a lot of dispute, a lot of fractions, And I think as we look at on migration or on taxation, there's a lot to discuss, and I hope we see differences between the candidates and so give the audience a good overview whom perhaps to choose.
Not to give too much away, we've got a few tricks up your sleeve potentially.
No, not tricks. I wouldn't say. I think it's an open debate. It's not like pressing somebody, from my perspective, into a certain corner. It's really to give people the overview. Who are those guys? They are not well known to anybody, and I think that's for me. What I'm hoping for is they distinguish themselves. They make clear who they are, what they are standing for, and get away from like the normal political blah blah, but really come across as a candidate, as a personality. That's what I hope for.
Okay, and then are you a little bit nervous about all of this?
Of course I am. So if you see this huge stage and you're thinking I'll be up there later this evening, it's a great honor in a way, but also a great responsibility. And I hope we're doing fine. I hope for all your support. But of course I'm nervous, of course. It's a great thing to do. I'm honored, but it's still a thing to do.
Okay, Max, thank you, and good luck tonight.
Thank you.
I'm sure you'll do a splendid job. This hall, or this chamber in a couple of hours, will be full of people, and indeed it is broadcast live from 9 p.m. Brussels time, and you'll be able to watch it, of course, here on Euronews 2.
That is right. You can watch the full Eurovision presidential debate, as Aaron was saying, with the 6 candidates for Commission President live here. So just again to remind you, 9 p.m. Brussels time. So that's 8 p.m. if you are in London. So don't forget to catch that. All right. So from what Darren was saying, and also the moderator there, what are you expecting, right? Because you were here for the last one, the 2014 one. What are you expecting this time to be different?
It's hard to say what's going to be different for the viewer because these people are not well known, as Marcus said. So in big televised debates and in member states, you know where the fault lines are between the candidates. People are going to see these candidates more or less the first time. They're going to be talking about subjects in a way which is to an international audience, not to a national audience. It's going to be hard to cut through with a clear message. And I think compared with the last time as well, it's not going to be that different, I have to say. I think the consequence of this challenge for them to come out on top, that will have a huge difference later, but that's not the moment. This is a moment just to see people. There's no decision tonight.
And we had a bit of a taste of what they would be talking about. Philip, you reacted a little bit there on the topics that Darren was saying. What are you looking out for to say that this debate will have its finger on the pulse of the people?
Yes, and I do think it has, with the choice of topics that has been made for tonight. If they're going to debate about the economy, youth unemployment, climate change and migration, then these 4 topics would indeed be the crucial topics also for European citizens, as we have seen it in the course of our past Eurobarometer surveys. These are indeed economy, youth unemployment are the key leading topics. And I think what we can expect from tonight is a debate on the issues. And this is quite removed from where perhaps the campaign or the public narrative on this campaign started out a year ago when we were debating, is this the avalanche of the populists or not? We are now back to the topics, and I think we can see and expect something quite interesting, different ideas on where Europe should go, and I think that's what all the debate is about.
Do you agree that the narrative has changed from the rise of the right and to the details of issues?
Well, the narrative has changed because in many ways subjects have changed. I mean, migration is much more now in debate in public opinion than it was 5 years ago. I think it will be really interesting to hear the different candidates with their positions on the different subjects. I think this will be really important to make the citizens connect with Europe, understand that's indeed here, that a lot of the future of our future is to be decided, and the parliament matters. In legislation, in politics, it matters.
But surely populism will still come up because, you know, in the debates that we had...
We don't have populist candidates here to debate.
Right.
If the populist candidates were here to debate, this would make a difference. Like last time, we have moderate candidates who are visually acceptable, who are soft in presentation, and what this is going to be is a likability contest. I don't think the core messages are really going to come away from this.
But we have
I'm sorry. Having populist candidates is not the choice of the EBU or of the organizer tonight. It was the choice of the parties themselves. It is one part of the story that there is no populist candidate because they don't have a lead candidate. There are pro-Europeans or people with ideas how to promote the European Union, how to bring it forward on the stage.
And I think the question is, why do we have populist forces now trying to destroy Europe and to destroy democracy? Because of some of the politics, the policies that were adopted earlier that were anti-European and that explain the disconnect between large segments of our people in all the countries with Europe. So it's about how do the candidates indeed acknowledge that some of the anti-European neoliberal policies really were the source, are the origin of these populist forces now intending to destroy Europe.
Okay, so in terms of issues, Philip, where do you think the biggest sticking point will be between the 6 candidates tonight?
It might be, well, it can be nearly everywhere. I would say it might be migrations to start off with. But there are also huge differences in approach when we come
climate change or economy
climate change,
jobs.
Austerity is going to be the single issue.
Completely.
This is the only issue that significantly divides the left and the right here. Everybody can agree on climate change. Everybody can agree on investing in innovation.
Migration also does.
Migration is just not, and in national polls we don't see migration at the top anymore.
Okay, so it's true. So it is what?
Austerity.
It's austerity, and how is it impact on daily life?
Impact on daily life. Is this the moment to roll back the austerity policies that came essentially from the right and from the liberal parties? Or is this a moment where the socialist agenda, the progressive agendas, they would say, moves further into the centre? That's the only thing that's going to cut through as a clear message.
Or addressing the questions of job creation now in view of the challenges put by the digital world we live in.
Everybody has the same messaging on that.
Okay. Yeah, go ahead, Philip.
I think Anna has one very, very important point that comes also back to you, the lack, if you want, of the populist candidate. So one of the challenges for tonight will be if the lead candidates on the stage are able to address the non-representative.
Well, it doesn't matter because populist candidates, they know their audience. Their audience is not necessarily going to engage with any of these candidates, and these candidates will not be able to persuade populist voters to switch sides because of a debate like this.
Before we move on, very quickly, Philip, do you think people will be watching based on your feel of from the surveys that you've been doing? Do you think people are as interested as, I guess, Parliament would want them to be?
I think they're more interested than in 2014, yes.
Yes, I agree with that.
Absolutely.
You agree as well?
Absolutely. And people understand that there are lots of challenges that are global, and we need the European scale, the European dimension to make a difference.
Okay. Well, all eyes may be on the race for the Commission President post, but there have been vocal opponents of the Spitzenkandidaten process itself. We did mention this word. This is the idea of allowing the nominee from the largest political group to succeed President Jean-Claude Juncker, and it has been criticized by many, including French President Emmanuel Macron. Now, he believes the process may result in Europe being given the, quote, least worst candidate. And the EPP candidate Manfred Weber hit back in an interview published this morning. He said, what's wrong with telling people before the election who should become president of the Commission? I believe in the power of democracy. Why does not Emmanuel Macron openly state whom he supports? That is not transparent. Well, the French President Emmanuel Macron and other EU leaders have their own ideas about who they might want to be the next EU Commission President. So let us hear why Macron opposes the Spitzenkandidaten idea.
Mais je crois que nous devons en tout cas éviter le compromis sur le moins bon candidat, ce qui a parfois pu être le cas dans certaines situations. Nous devons prendre les meilleurs candidats possibles pour un projet européen fort et d'ambition. Et c'est ça ce que nous allons nous atteler à faire ensemble. Il faudra des compromis entre les uns et les autres et les sensibilités, mais je m'emploierai en tout cas à ce qu'on ait des dirigeants qui soient le plus fort possible, le plus clair possible. Ce serait bon que dans chaque pays, en tout cas partout en Europe, on élise plusieurs dizaines de parlementaires vraiment sur une base européenne, et à ce moment-là, on pourra avoir des grands partis européens qui porteront un candidat, il aura une légitimité démocratique. En attendant, moi je ne me sens pas engagé par le processus que certains partis ont décidé pour eux-mêmes.
And joining us to discuss this is Dennis Abbott, a communications expert who is Managing Director of Media Relations for BCW Global. Good of you to join us. And you're also a journalist and a commission spokesperson before, so you do know the inner workings of this. Now, this is the second time that the Spitzenkandidat process is going to be, they're trying to make a success out of it. Why do you think there is such resistance from the council? Is this all about an internal power struggle that people are watching and just saying, okay, what's going on?
You know, it is a bit of a power struggle, but I think there are a lot of people who are fairly lukewarm about this process. A survey came out recently which showed only 40% of the European public support this process. I think some people are worried that, you know, it really restricts the talent pool. You know, previously as Commission President, we've had the pick of Prime Ministers. OK, last time we used the process and a former Prime Minister emerged. But this time, it looks like Manfred Weber is going to get the job. And who's Manfred Weber? He's virtually unknown in his own country. He's certainly not known in the other 27 member states. And so what do we want? An ex-prime minister or a political pygmy?
It did the process did produce Jean-Claude Juncker. So is the problem Manfred Weber or the process itself, which the aim is to make the whole thing more democratic for the people?
The process, I think, needs adjustment, but it's going the right direction. If it doesn't happen this time and they put somebody else in, I think the process is dead. But if it goes forward this time, I think it will be established.
Is that the goal, do you think, that for
No, I don't think it's necessarily the goal. I think there are a lot of other issues in play right now. There's the council seat, the head of the presidency of the parliament. You've got the European Central Bank. All these things are in the mix as well. This is why Macron and others are hedging their bets. They want to see how things line up after the election. They want to see exactly who has the power. And then they will find a way through this as well. Manfred Weber, I have to disagree with Dennis. I think he's in the worst position to get this job. But we had a former prime minister, and this could be something they put in place as a condition. Right. It must be a former minister like Timmermans or Vestager as well, or it could be they could say there has to be a prime minister because you need executive experience to be able to govern at this level.
Would you?
Well, I believe that this is the right system to actually make the citizens connect with the candidates and their programs and have them commit to their programs.
People don't even know who they are.
But that's why we need probably more debates like this one today. But I have no doubt that this, by the way, this should go together with transnational lists.
Yes,
and they want to prevent it because there is a power struggle. And the council doesn't like, indeed, anything that brings, indeed, the citizens and
so the council, the heads of state.
Choice.
Okay, go ahead, Dennis.
And that's why they have picked a guy like Weber that, in my opinion, is very weak. They want to thwart the Spitzenkandidat.
There is I think that there has traditionally often been a weak candidate's pick because member states don't want a strong candidate. But in today's world, don't we want somebody as Commission President who other world leaders are going to sit up and take notice of?
Absolutely.
If Manfred Weber turns up, I'm sorry, he's not Angela Merkel. If it was Angela Merkel, maybe. She's going to carry respect and authority.
Okay,
if she was the pick.
I do have a question about...
I'm not.
No, I'm not discounting her at all. She would be a great
That's exactly the kind of card they can take out of their pockets.
Even if you have an Angela Merkel, even if she comes out the winner in all this, look, if this process is rejected, wouldn't this play into the hands of the Eurosceptics who will just say, hey, look at this. They try to be democratic, they just can't do it.
No, I don't think Eurosceptics care that much about this process. I think the
What about people?
No, people don't. They will look at the character involved.
Yeah.
If it was Merkel, they would respect Merkel, as Dan said. If it's a weak character who they don't know, they will disregard. But it doesn't go much further than that. The European institutions should have more self-confidence and put people with real character, real strength in positions of power.
I'm not sure. Can I just say, I'm not sure that the Commission has to be democratic. We have a European Parliament. We're going to have elections in a week's time.
That's an interesting point.
That is the democratic institution. We have a council where you have elected...
But in the UK, you know that this is a point of
ministers.
criticism.
But I'm sorry. Whitehall is not elected.
Sure. But it's not the Commission itself, it's the programme. The programme is the result of which the candidate, each candidate represents. And I guess in this sense you can say that Merkel, if she were to replace Weber after the decision, Of course, you would be committed by the kind of program that their party presents.
Let's hold that thought, because we did ask one of the candidates about this process, because over the past few weeks, we've had a special series of shows with those who are in the running to be the next Spitzenkandidat. Here's what the Alliance of Conservatives and Reformers candidate Jan Zahradil said about the process yesterday.
Look, it's a useful thing to have one figurehead of each and every political party. But probably, unlike all the others, I still believe that when it comes to selection of a European Commission president, I believe that the Council should have the upper hand and not the European Parliament.
The process is dead anyway, isn't it? You listen to EU leaders, Macron's against it, a lot of leaders are against it, Rutte's against it. It's not going to happen, is it?
Look, if I was not a Spitzenkandidat, I couldn't have talked to you, to those nice young
exactly.
people.
Why are we...
To all people at TV or online, and I couldn't have gotten my message through. So it's a useful thing. I think that you can concentrate the whole program, the whole set of principles of your political party into one person, and that person is responsible for delivering the message.
All right. As the comms expert here, he doesn't believe in the process, but he says it is a great platform to get our message across. He has a good point. Does he make a good point?
Yes, he makes a good point, but this is a process that was dreamt up by nerds.
Okay.
Okay. So that's why it's completely unappealing to the public. The public doesn't care. Can't even say the word. It's it's impossible to pronounce. And this is about having a strong leader for Europe. And by the way, it's time to have a woman as president. So too many men.
We do have that.
And the two women are actually quite good. These two women.
And Ska Keller as well. Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, that Spitzenkandidat debate is still happening despite this conversation. Okay. Coming up on Raw Politics, how do you stop the spread of extremist content on social media? World leaders are gathering in Paris to find a solution. Plus, Turkey's president wants some NBA playoff games banned from the airwaves, all because of one player. That's after the break.
This Friday on Euronews.
The ocean is the cradle of life. It provides the food we eat, half of the oxygen we breathe, and the energy we increasingly rely on. Explore the new opportunities and challenges that lie within our seas, and meet the men and women who work in the blue economy. Come with us on a voyage of discovery in ocean every month on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, exactly 2 months ago, the eyes of the world turned to New Zealand as a lone gunman live streamed his attack on two Christchurch mosques, and it killed 51 people. And now, a move to try and stop that from happening again. French President Emmanuel Macron welcomed New Zealand's Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern in Paris today, and the two are co-hosting a summit aimed at fighting terrorist content online, and are joined by world leaders and representatives from the world's biggest tech firms. And now Alex Morgan from our social media news desk, theCUBE, has been following the events in Paris for us. So Alex, what do you have?
Well, Tessa, this is a feature that's supposed to be used for you and I to be able to share stories, for us to share moments and memories with our friends. And let me show you how easy it is to use Facebook Live. First of all, you open the app. Right top left, you see this button. You simply press that, boom, Facebook Live. And now if I turn the camera around, you can see what I'm seeing. It's Isidro, my cameraman here. I could just push this big blue button at the bottom that says Start Live Video. And I would start publicly live streaming a video. That is how easy it is to use Facebook Live. And it was this feature that was used by the attacker in the Christchurch mosque attack, used by that terrorist. And it is this feature, particularly, that Jacinda Ardern, the Prime Minister of New Zealand, focused in on. In a piece in the New York Times, she wrote this: "Social media needs reform." She goes on to say, "No one should be able to broadcast mass murder." It was by turning a feature designed for all of us to use into something so much more sinister that has given rise to what Jacinda Ardern is calling the Christchurch call. That is, if you like, the main message she wants. But this is a much wider conference about tackling extremism online. Let's just bring you up what Facebook have had to say, because, of course, after Christchurch, their live streaming platform has been under increased focus. Well, they've said now they're going to introduce a one-strike policy. That is, if anybody breaks the rules of Facebook on Facebook Live, even by simply sharing a video from a terrorist organization without context, so even if it's not their video, say they're re-uploading it, they will be one strike, and then they will get this: restricted access. Now, that could be up to a 30-day ban, they say. The idea here is to clamp down on people breaking the rules and using Facebook Live to do it. They also say here, one of the difficulties, they said, was tracking down the re-uploads of the live stream from Christchurch. So they're investing €6.7 million into developing more advanced software with academics, with industry leaders, to detect footage that might have even been changed ever so slightly, so that this kind of content, as in Christchurch, can't keep popping up again and again and again. So Facebook were under huge pressure. Jacinda Ardern making, if you like, her main entry point into this conference, clamping down on the abuse of live streaming software. But look, just remember a few years ago, it was ISIS propaganda that was being manipulated. So there's a wider question here about how the internet companies are responding to the challenge. Adam Hadley here spoke to Jacinda Ardern yesterday. He works for a company called Tech Against Terrorism. This is what he had to say on that point.
So smaller platforms present a real challenge in terms of, well, we need to outreach with these platforms, we need to upskill them, provide resources, but also an opportunity to understand more about how terrorists are using the internet and intervene accordingly.
So the idea here, more needs to be done, not just on the big platforms, on the small ones too, Tessa. A big conference, a lot being discussed, and of course the Christchurch call, many leaders saying they're keen to answer it.
All right, thanks for that, Alex. And here with us in the studio to discuss this is Jennifer Baker, a tech expert and founder of BrusselsGeek.com. And still with us, Ana Gomes, a Portuguese MEP from the Socialists and Democrats group, and Dennis Abbott, from a communications expert from BCW Global. All right, Jennifer, you were reacting to when Alex was explaining what was going on. You've covered big tech. First, is it easy to get them on board, and is this the right way to go about dealing with the problem?
Well, we talk about big tech. I mean, let's be honest, just because you take someone off a platform, these people don't stop existing. And that's the first thing to say. So, I mean, this is a broader social problem, and focusing on the tech side of it, certainly it's relevant and it's useful, but it's not so much big tech, it's the smaller tech. The Christchurch killer, he was on this platform called 8chan, there's another one, there's 4chan, they're on Gab, they're on all these smaller sites. Reddit is a hotbed of extremism as well. And he posted 3 days before the attack, he posted a picture of his gun, he posted the magazine, and he posted his manifesto, and no one was monitoring it. And partly that's because there's been this very big focus online on Islamic terrorism, to the point that people have forgotten to look at...
But can those places be monitored, actually?
Yeah, they absolutely can be monitored.
Okay.
I mean, it's you get your police forces and your security agents to monitor them. They sign up for them and they watch what's going on in them. I mean, it can be done.
So what's going on in Paris, is that the right way to go?
I think that's a little bit too little too late. It's not really going to tackle the root cause of the problem.
All right.
I agree. Too little too late. I cannot tell you off the cuff what is the solution, but definitely the solution requires exactly cooperation at the EU level, regulation, and do not rely on self-regulation by big tech. And it's not just about big tech, as you say, but it's also small tech companies. But the question is, we can't go on with this big tech who actually capture our own government. And, it's not only in the way they use and they misuse the technology, it's actually the fact that they don't pay taxes. It's simply not acceptable. We have to break them and we have to govern them. And of course, this requires strong European cooperation and global cooperation.
They are showing it.
They are have this things detected and the content online be wiped out.
So Dennis, from a comms point of view, this is a good thing, or is it just a PR stunt? At the end of the day, if first of all, non-binding declaration will come out of this. Okay, non-binding already, it's toothless. So what is this exercise?
I think it's much more than a PR stunt, to be
Okay.
fair. I think Macron has showed he's got a track record for taking on big tech. I don't agree, with Jennifer about this being a small tech issue. You know, Facebook are right at the heart of this problem. They took ages, 24 hours, to take down the hideous broadcast in Christchurch. And I'm sorry, Mark Zuckerberg, I don't believe he could give a flying fig about the situation. He's interested in money and business. That's what matters. They're not bothered about public safety. They will say they are, but I'm sorry, you can't see the evidence.
Zuckerberg is not there. Can we say that? Can it even be a success without one of the biggest?
He sent his minion Nick Clegg. That's how much importance he attaches to an event where you've got some of the biggest world leaders and one of the most serious episodes, which has been broadcast on Facebook. I'm sorry, it might have been recorded on small tech, but big tech have a huge responsibility
here
not
we
living
need to
up to
deal
their
with is
responsibilities.
what are we trying to actually address here? Are we addressing the fact that this was broadcast, or do we really want to address the online radicalization? Because that is not taking place openly on the big channels. What they're doing is they can advertise where they are, and then they send people to these smaller encrypted channels, and that is where the real radicalization is taking place. Not, people aren't going on to Facebook's public open profiles.
Why not? But here it's actually broadcasting live and making propaganda of it. And I think in this respect, talking to the New Zealand Prime Minister, who actually acted admirably in face of this terrible terrorist attack, it's really important also for us in Europe to learn. And you're right, it's also paying attention, the police, the law enforcement and the intelligence, to right-wing extremism, which was the one responsible for this in Christchurch and from other terrorist attacks also in Europe. We had the Utoya event in Norway and probably many more, because let's not be naive. Some of these guys now with a nasty anti-European and extreme right-wing propaganda are the enablers of the
Dennis, I'll give you the last word. Go ahead.
I think the last thing I would say is I'm no great fan of Emmanuel Macron, but he's not jumping on a PR bandwagon here. France, and he in particular, have really shown leadership against big tech.
So how do we make it more than just a non-binding declaration? How do you get these people?
On taxation, exactly.
Which is a crucial question.
And copyright, paying journalists for their content. I mean, France has done a lot.
Okay. All right. Let's leave it there. There's going to be, still a big story, and we're following. But now let's move on, because if you're a basketball fan, you know that the NBA playoffs, they're on right now. But fans in Turkey, they'll be missing out on some of them, and perhaps the biggest game of all. It's all because of one player in Portland, Oregon. Let's take a look. It's not often that basketball and politics collide. But for Turkish NBA star Enes Kanter, the two have become inseparable. Portland is deep into the playoffs, but Turkey is refusing to air any games in which Kanter participates, even the NBA final if Portland makes it that far. That's because the Trailblazers center has been an outspoken critic of Turkey's President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and a supporter of cleric Fethullah Gulen, the man Turkey blames for a failed coup in 2016. Turkey responded with an arrest warrant accusing Kanter of having terrorist links. Kanter denies the claims and says he's so afraid he will be arrested or even killed, he's refused to travel outside of the United States. That's prompted one U.S. senator to call on Canada to protect the player if his team reaches the NBA Finals against Toronto. No response from Canada yet, but however this basketball drama plays out, it's the Turkish fans who may be crying foul. Okay, we really don't have much time for this, but Anna, I'll go to you. This is a serious message from Turkish leadership and worrying for the EU.
It's outrageous, and the EU cannot be silent, cannot accept. This is a terrible betrayal of the Turkish people, those who wanted to join the EU for the democracy and human rights. We cannot fail them. We cannot be silent in face of this behavior by Erdogan, and we cannot legitimize, because through deals like the one on on migration that has been negotiated by Germany. We cannot give a clean bill of health to a regime that is oppressing the people of Turkey.
All right, okay, let's move on now, because coming up on Raw Politics, have you ever eaten a veggie burger? Well, if Brussels has its way, you may soon be calling them veggie discs. The backlash sparked by new food labeling proposals. That's after the break.
Sometimes, as we are going about our daily lives, whether it's having a cup of coffee or heading to work, we can forget that economics, business and politics are all interconnected, and they can impact the way we spend our money or save it, even our political choices and the future of our countries.
To get to know everything you need to know about your real economy, join the Real Economy team on Euronews and Euronews.com.
Welcome back to Raw Politics. Now, all eyes are on populist candidates ahead of the EU elections as the rise of anti-establishment parties and leaders continues around the world. Now, populism will be on the agenda in tonight's EBU debate as well. But what do we mean when we talk about populism? Is it right-wing Euroscepticism that threatens the unity of Europe, or is it a stand against ruling elites that reflects the will of the people? Well, that was a debate last night at a Euronews event called Europe Popular or Populist. Let's hear a flavor of that debate.
For the first time since its creation, we've got enemies of Europe, people who want to destroy Europe. That's what populism is about. And if those populists unite, and if the pro-Europeans are divided, then we can be at a stalemate first, and then it would be the first step for the victory of the populists, whom we can call nationalists and extreme rightists.
Le problème avec les populistes commence au moment où on va écouter leurs soi-disant recettes pour remédier à ces causes. Et là, ils font une erreur capitale, c'est de penser qu'on peut retourner dans l'histoire, que c'est un monde dans l'avenir qui sera basé sur les États-nations et pas sur des grands empires comme par exemple la Chine, l'Inde et la Russie.
All right, joining us in the studio to discuss this is Mark Tarbella, a Belgian MEP from the Socialists and Democrats group, and we have William Dartmouth, a British MEP from the Europe for Freedom and Direct Democracy group, and Laura Shields, a communications expert and founder of Red Thread Communications. All right, I'll start with you, Laura, because as we were saying there earlier, what is a populist in this? Are we talking about far-right populists, far-left populists, anti-establishment? There's a lot of ways to describe populists, and we all just lump them into one word. How important is it to define what a populist is?
Well, I think it's very important to define what it is, and I'm not going to claim to have the answer, to be honest, because I actually don't know, and I've had various debates with people about what it is. I think certainly there's a strong anti-establishment dimension, as in giving the people who are considered to be the historical elites and ruling parties a bloody nose, because in many countries there was a sense that nothing was really changing. I think you can have left-wing populism, you can have right-wing populism. I think that the things that define them, certainly from the perspective that I take, is that they are media savvy, they understand the power of emotional, simple messages, and they're very, very good at delivering sound bites. And as a result, they're able to get cut through in Europe because actually the EU is rules-based, technical, and quite slow to move.
So they get the attention and the headlines.
Yeah, they can get the attention very easily.
And William, you have been called a populist yourself, and populism is such a big part now of the European debate that towards the election. What role do you think politicians that are called populists have in this debate? What are they doing?
Well, I think it's very, very important because there's a lot of people who've actually been ignored, and there are very profound problems.
So you feel you represent the voices that are being ignored?
I wouldn't claim to. I mean, I wouldn't claim to represent people who've been ignored necessarily, but a lot of people have been ignored, and that is why we have this phenomena going right, as has just been said, going right across the political spectrum, right, centre, left, and left. Syriza in Greece is a left-wing party. The Five Star Movement, which are now in the Italian government, is a centre-left party. So it's completely simplistic to say that it's just right or actually right-wing. But what has to be understood, and this is the important point I'd like to make, is that the alternative to populism is elitism. And in Commissioner Moscovici, we've just heard the authentic voice of the elite. And it's not Europe that people are against. They are against the built-in, self-perpetuating nomenclatura, the bureaucracy of the European Union, of which Moscovici is a very undistinguished is a very obvious representative. Now that's what needs to be understood. There are real problems that aren't being addressed. There are real people who are being ignored, and worse still, the elite are all calling them idiots. Idiots.
You say the elite, but how many politicians are really not part of the elite? To be very honest, and who can claim to know exactly what the working class and the poor and everyone else who are unheard.
Well, there'll be a turnover. There'll be a change in MEPs. I can say this because I'm not staff. There'll be a change of MEPs in the next election of between 60 and 65%. So there'll be a lot of new people, new MEPs coming in who will be better connected. I mean, for example, the French socialists.
Let me ask Mark to jump in as a socialist. As a socialist, as you were saying, there are populists from the left, but normally they're associated with the right. What about your position on populism and what they're doing to Europe?
What I consider that in the European institution, many populism are not working really in this parliament. They criticize the work of the others at the TV show, but they are never in the decision meetings when we have to decide on some concrete aspect and something that they are useful for citizens. For example, I had a hard work job 2 years ago, not many years ago, but during 2 years to improve the mechanism of public procurement. But the populists, as Salvini, they are not in the meeting today. They criticize our job at the end of the process in the plenary, but they are not in the not involved in the committees. It's more easy to criticize the work of the others and not to be involved concretely in the work.
So you know that there are no populists in the Spitzenkandidat debate that's happening tonight. What kind of message does that send?
My message
but it's not engaging with populists. I mean,
no, I think that it's not an error to commit. It's to make the distinction between populist and not populist, pro-European and anti-European. I'm not in this distinction because I think in the pro-European I'm clearly a progressive, and we have many conservative, for example, German liberal. I'm not approach of the German liberal because I think that we have to fight and to face some challenges. Climate change, but also right of workers, right of some people. They are a little bit ignored at the European level. Pension people. You have to fight for more social security in Europe.
Laura, jump in.
Well, I was actually going to say, I think one of the things that's interesting about populists, I sort of was going to pull a bit, I was going to triangulate, actually, one bit from William and a bit from Mark. When populists sometimes actually get into positions of power, very different things happen. So in the case in Italy, what we're seeing is that even though Five Star were actually the largest party in the coalition, it's Salvini that's ridden in and is making all the noise at the moment and is still riding a wave. In Greece, Tsipras came into power with this whole kind of we're going to smash the plutocrats message and very quickly found out how difficult that was and has had to actually work within the system. And a few weeks ago was on the record as saying Greece has actually learnt the hard way and nationalism and sort of, a very simplistic approach isn't going to work.
Okay, very interesting there. Okay, we'll leave it there because now we have to move on. Should a veggie burger still be called a burger? Quite a shift there. Well, that's a debate that is causing a stir across Europe today. Let's take a look and find out why.
The veggie burger, a popular meal choice for those who don't eat meat as well as those who do. Sweeping to fame in recent years, the demand for meat-free food like this has soared. Better for the environment and, some say, better for your health. Companies are striving to capitalize on the age of meatless meat. But with more and more plant-based alternatives on the market, some MEPs here are worried similar labels might mean we're unable to tell the difference. That's why they're pushing for new food labeling rules that would see veggie burgers and sausages rebranded as veggie discs and tubes. But vegans are striking back. A petition against the changes gained some 10,000 signatures in a single day, with critics arguing there's just no evidence to suggest consumer confusion. So, have Europe's politicians bitten off more than they can chew?
Okay, we don't have much time for this, but simple question. Is this necessary, really?
I think that it's an error I'm against the name veggie burger. Why? Because burger is cheese. It's meat. Sorry, it's meat.
Who says?
As soya is not milk, it's a juice. And I think that milk is from animal origin. And I think that we have to inform correctly the consumer and not
But no one who sees the word veggie burger would think that the burger is meat.
Veggie product, veggie what else, but not burger. Burger, it means meat.
Who says? No, seriously, who says? Who decided back in the mists of time that it had to be written in stone tablets that it was a burger was made of meat? I'm vegetarian, so I want to know how this is protecting me and how it's protecting meat eaters like William. Now, I hate the bendy bananas story, right? This is going to become a trope.
Sure.
But how is this protecting anybody?
We have to give a correct information to consumer, to people.
Sure.
Okay. As a few years ago, we fight for not the soya milk.
Okay.
It's not correct. I think it's soya juice. Okay. And I think it's the same for burger. Burger is meat.
I think this is going to come up. This is going to come up again. All right, but we've run out of time, unfortunately. But it will come up again because the Parliament is going to vote for it after the elections. In fact, okay. Coming up on the program, your chance to call in and tell us what you think about tonight's presidential debate. A special hour-long Your Call is coming up at 10:30 p.m. Brussels time. The contact information is all on your screen. So, as usual, you can call us for free at 00800 3333 7002 and get in on the debate using hashtag #RawPolitics, and our lines will be opening towards the end of that debate. Did any of the hopefuls win your vote?